Between 1979 and 1981, Atlanta is a city deeply familiar with its colorful history and vigorous culture. Went through a spell of tragic events, one after another. The Atlanta child killings case, chilling and disturbing, left an ineradicable mark on the community, traumatizing the young, breaking its elders' hearts, and throwing every home into a desperate search for a solution. This is the tale, those agonizing years. It started in the summer of 1979. Edward Smith, aged 14 years, disappeared on July 21st. His body was found the next day, as the community was soon to learn, was just the first in a long line of mysterious disappearances and murders. Over the next 2 years, young black boys and adolescents were found dead in woods, rivers, and trash piles all throughout the city. Each new victim filled everyone with a growing sense of horror. From 1979 to 1981, at least 28 children, adolescents, and young adults were killed. The overwhelming majority of those victims were young black males between the ages of 7 and 28. As the list of caseloads grew longer every day, police who had been swamped with current investigations started to exhaust all their leads. When the story of these tragedies is put in chronological order, it makes a terrifying picture. First, victims, like Edward Smith, would be picked up by someone or something, only to turn up days or weeks, even longer, later, with often brutal marks on their bodies. As months rolled into years, the number of deaths grew almost faster than anything else in town. In every home, people lived in constant terror and uncertainty. As the death toll continued to mount, the community's frustration became anger. Parents were clamoring for answers. Local activists organized demonstrations to call attention to the fate of Atlanta's children. Then newspapers, national and local, got involved in the story. This put pressure on authorities everywhere to act. We felt like our children were being ignored. The media attention did help, but it also brought the issue into sharper focus. We needed to get the police to take this seriously and protect our kids, activists said. The media played a critical role in bringing the Atlanta child murders to national attention. News outlets were running stories on the disappearances and death, focusing on the fear and despair gripped the community. With public interest growing, the authorities had little alternative but to accept further investigation into this matter. And the wider visibility brought challenges as well. The news coverage often included interviews with families of the victims and worried citizens, vividly portraying the emotional toll these murders were taking on Atlanta. Permanent media presence added pressure to the already overworked police, but also gave the public a place to ventilate their demand for safety and justice. As the Atlanta Police Department began to feel the heat, they formed a special task force on the murders. The FBI and other federal agencies assisted, but leads were hard to come by, and the community was beginning to feel more and more uneasy. The geographical variations of the murders made it hard to find a uniform pattern. However, there were similarities in some of the cases that began to emerge. Many of the victims had been last seen with a major expressway nearby, which suggested they might have been snatched by someone in a car. We were dealing with a very evasive suspect. The victims were often snatched from busy areas, yet there were few eyewitnesses. Clearly, the perpetrator was familiar with these areas and knew how to stay undetected. Investigators said. Investigators sifted through mountains of evidence, interviewing witnesses and following up countless leads. They constructed profiles of potential suspects, but in the end, no solid evidence was found. The absence of clear patterns in the kidnappings and killings made the case even more involved. There was more than one challenge confronting us. The murders were not limited to any one area or age group, and this made it difficult for us to determine a motive. However, the dead came in all colors, wore different clothes, and took themselves seriously. That's the nature of homicide. It's so many unrelated things thrown together into one heap. When investigators looked at the dead bodies, nothing seemed to bind them together. The task force met some additional problems. There was little forensic evidence available for the case at that time, and as a result, it soon became clear that most scientific analyses have to be messy guesswork. Meanwhile, forensic scientists came onto the scene and began a series of painstaking fiber analyses, in the hope that one of these might tie an individual victim to the killing. This particular line of work would soon produce important breakthrough. Fiber analysis was about the only weapon available to us. We took fibers from the clothing of victims and compared them with samples from all over. It was slow, meticulous work that ultimately produced a critical piece of evidence. That's what the forensic experts said. When fibers were compared, the list of possibilities dwindled to potential sources. Investigators discovered from analysis of the fibers that many found on victims were of a type commonly used in home carpeting and vehicles. Clue would later be central to Wayne Williams' case. The fibers on many of the victims coming from the same source gave the investigators a definite lead. It suggested a clear direction. Perhaps they had had contact with a common person. It was a breakthrough that infused new vitality into the investigation, but also forced investigators to ask many new questions. Finally, there was a breakthrough in May 1981. Wayne Williams, a 23-year-old freelance photographer and music promoter, was arrested after being linked to the murder of 2 adult men. Based on fibers and dog hairs found on the victims that matched those in his home and car, Williams then became a prime suspect in child slayings too. The trial of Wayne Williams began in January 1982. The prosecution presented evidence associating Williams with the murders of children as well as adults, including fibers from his home, car, and dog that matched those found on victim. Williams insisted on his innocence throughout. The case against Wayne Williams was largely circumstantial. There was no direct evidence linking him to the child murders. While the fiber evidence was convincing, it was not conclusive. We argued that it could not be used to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Defense attorney said. Prosecution, however, presented a very good case. They made the point that so many independent strands of identical fibers from Williams' house and car kept showing up on victim after victim. This could not be chance. In addition, they cited contradictions in Williams' statements, along with his conduct during the investigation. It was a trial that captured public attention. Coverage of the case inundated news outlets, and people across the country followed the case closely. Though mostly circumstantial, enough evidence had been presented to paint a shocking picture. Williams' defense had a tough time controlling the emerging prosecution story. In the end, the verdict of this trial was guilty, which would have very far-reaching consequences. In March of 1982, Wayne Williams was found guilty of murdering 2 black males, Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. Both victims were adults, and he got life sentences for both killings. Although many of the child killings were also attributed to Williams, there were still a number of others in the community, as well as a few outside experts, who were not convinced. Most of the evidence against Williams in the child murders was circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses, and the fiber evidence, while convincing, was not conclusive. The debate about whether Williams was truly the killer goes on to this day, continues Ed Wells. Controversy surrounding Wayne Williams' conviction has yet to be resolved. Some believe that the investigation has been flawed and he is innocent. Others argue that, though the evidence was largely circumstantial, was more than enough to prove his guilt. There have been a great many theories and debates on this case. Still no clear consensus. Friends of Wayne Williams have been working for his release. They point out that there is no direct evidence against him and that he was convicted on purely circumstantial ground. Thus, the real killer may still be at large, and the whole case deserves further investigation. This ongoing debate keeps the memories of the Atlanta child murders alive among the public. The Atlanta child murders had a great impact on the city. Many years after Williams was convicted, the case was brought up again. In 2019, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and Police Chief Erica Shields announced that they would be re-examining these murders with information from modern DNA technology. The re-examination of the evidence is an effort to bring closure to the victims' families and to the community. While some feel that the law has been served, others hope new evidence may throw light on this dark chapter in Atlanta's history. The pain and suffering we've endured for all these years, all we want now is to know the truth and honor our loved one's memory, family members said. The renewed investigation is a continuation of the search for justice and closure. The development of forensic science and DNA testing hold out hope that new evidence might shine the light on this case. The attempts to reinvestigate the murders show a commitment to making sure that victims and their families have those answers they deserve. The legacy of the Atlanta child murders serves as a reminder, the imperative for community vigilance, and what this means in terms of systemic changes to protect vulnerable population. This case has sparked efforts which seek to provide support to those at risk as young people, along with policies that aim at harmonious community life and good relations between police and locals alike. The Atlanta child murders made clear some of the significant issues in our society. We must go on working together to solve these problems and make sure that such tragedies do not happen again. Providing for our youth and building trust between the community and law enforcement are essential parts of this process, said community leader. Heads of organizations, together with community leaders, have started various programs to help children who are in danger, set up safe places for them, and provided educational opportunities. The goal is to get to the root causes of violence and assure a better tomorrow for the city's children. From these programs of youth, mentorship, and community involvement, there is a difference being made. They offer hope and the potential for resilience, showing that in the midst of despair, progress remains possible. The remembrance of victims buttresses attempts to create a safer and fairer society. The Atlanta child murders had far-reaching effects on the criminal justice system. It undoubtedly raised the requirement for advanced methods of investigation and cooperation with other agencies, as well as increased resources to solve serious crimes of this nature. These lessons have had an impact on how law enforcement agencies handle similar cases up to the present day. The challenges that we faced in the course of the Atlanta child murders investigation drove home the importance of working together and innovation in policing. Since then, we have made great advances in both forensic science and investigative technology and continue to learn from our past experiences, said law enforcement official. After the Atlanta child murders, the adoption of forensic techniques such as DNA analysis and fiber testing became essential tools in solving crimes. Insights drawn from the Atlanta child murders investigation contributed to the development of these modern methods, which have been used to solve countless cases and bring offenders to justice. The case has also led to changes in how policing shares information and police forces communicate. Better coordination between local, state, and federal agencies not only improves the response to, but also ensures that it is possible to get at root causes of a particularly difficult case. These reforms have strengthened the effectiveness of criminal justice. Atlanta has changed a great deal since the dark years of 1979 to 1981. The city has progressed and grown, but its memories of the Atlanta child murders remain. As Boston moves forward to heal, there is a shared commitment to remember the victims and make sure their stories are not forgotten. The child murders in Atlanta are a significant portion of the city's history. They remind us not only the dangers we confronted, but how well we handled them. Let's remember the victims and use the past as our guide, making a richer future. Historians said, the citizens of Atlanta commemorate the victims by various means. They have established memorials, arranged educational programs, and put effort into making their city a safer place in which to live. The city's resilience and determination to create a community that is more secure and more inclusive speak volumes about its people's strength and quality of spirit. The Atlanta child murders were a story of heartbreak and loss, but they can also be seen as a story of hope and determination. While we remember the victims, we also salute the positive changes CAP message. There's hope in the future. We look towards a future where every child is safe and every community healthy. The Atlanta child murders continue to be a troubled tale, one full of sorrow, pain, and a ceaseless chase for justice. As we pay homage to these victims, we also keep in our hearts lessons from past errors to make a better future for all children. Thank you for watching. Please remember to both like, share, and subscribe to us for more stories of real crime.